Peace and black power to you all, family. I would like to take this blessed opportunity to humbly address you on one of the topics that I am dealing with in the work I'm currently putting together to be availed soon as a published literary offering, as a book to be titled Unshackle, Stepping on Toes. You might have seen on my timeline, I have been sharing posts containing extracts, from this pot that I'm currently stirring. The topic that I would really like to share with you is the illusion of black politics in absence of a sovereign African indigenous body politic, wherein the root problem that I find we as a race to be having with the white power, terror, domination, and deceit is fundamentally the problem of hegemony, and that is the problem of a dominated people plagued by powerlessness. To simply say is political, I am of the view that would be an understatement. We are a people who can't self-determine, who can't create a new reality for ourselves and build a world that we desire to live in. And therefore our departure point, I reason, in this work would have to be reclaiming, retrieving our life-defining values first, which we can use to inform a world view that will frame the cognitive maps through which to navigate ourselves, to convey ourselves in a liberation struggle discourse toward the restorative revolutionary goals we would, by consensus, have agreed upon. Because the blueprint of the liberation that we talk about, that we want, it is crucial that it gets prefigured during the liberation struggle discourse, that it is imperative for us to fruitfully engage in at this point in time. There is no such thing as black politics or a black politician, really, in absence of an autonomous, sovereign African essence encapsulating polity and body politic. There's only really black people who are flirting with the muscle of their own repression. Seeing people in and out of quote-unquote power, in and out of it, and never possess one. That's why you have often heard the common phrase, so and so is in power. So power is not something that is our possession, is something that is in somebody else's possession that we can jump in and out of. And it is clear that somebody else possesses it. Yours is simply to jump in and out of it every 5 years, using the numbers of our naive and unsuspecting people to gamble your way in. It's going to happen next year. It's going to happen next year. So the current body politic is really a corporation that remains the master's house, because we have not reached a point where we have thoroughly dealt with consciousness as far as defining values upon which a blueprint for the freedom that we would envision would be based upon. Because it is important for us to move not only from a negative point of defining freedom in terms of that from which we want to be free, but also in terms of that for which we are engaging on this noble quest for. It is important for us to know what is it that we want this freedom for. We have already defined that from which we want it. So one of the reasons why there's sloppiness, there's apathy on the part of the majority of our people when it comes to the necessity, the dire need to engage in this epic struggle for them to fight for what is rightfully theirs, is that there is no value that is commonly agreed upon in terms of which the freedom we are on a quest of is defined. So, which makes our objectives wanting, because we do not know what is it that we want freedom for. We only know what is it that we want it from. And I really find that to be really inadequate. I really find that to be really inadequate. And as so-called Republic of South Africa remains the master's house, when you look at the modern day slave master, he has simply reconciled the field slaves and the house slaves by getting the field slave to stop rebelling against the slave master and striving to conscientize his fellow brother or sister, the house slave, to get him out of the slave master's house. The modern day slave master has simply pacified the rebellious field slave with a false sense of prestige and sophistication, so-called right, which is actually wrong, to elect who among themselves they would want to live in the master's house on a so-called representative capacity, the master's house in the form of either parliament or cabinet, in our case, over which they would even take each other to court and, or at worst, kill each other. Today, all the slaves The house ones and the field ones are crying together, jointly, and they say, "Our house, help, our house." And they are referring to the state, which is actually the master's house. "Our house is under capture." That is the outcry. And we would have to find then our true aspirations and build a world with institutions serving such, inculcating a self-love, self-help philosophy from whence to do for self, putting your race first. Programs which will ensure that programmatically the very aspirations, the very meditations we have been imbued with in the liberation discourse reach their full institutional fullness for fruition to come forth. Our enemies have already invented the reverse racism, because I've mentioned the race first philosophical posture. Our enemies have already, through their liberal project, invented the reverse racism concept to actually psychologize you and I to being a perpetual self-defeatist people who sabotage their own rise, who reverse psychologize themselves into feeling guilty about loving about loving themselves. This is the psychodynamic of living within a psychosocial framework that is on the psychological conveyor belt of the liberal project, that is geared at pacifying, neutralizing, and weakening our resistance against the white terror, dominion, and deceit.